What time is it?
It's almost live. The
Looks
content
like
of
we're
the
on.
Of course.
oh, I think it's live. Yeah.
It's alive?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Good morning, everyone. East Side. Today, the four of us here, we have Marvin,
Hello.
have James, and we have Kosuke and myself. And we're going to be discussing chapter 74. And the title of the chapter is Before Ananias and the Court of Caiaphas. So this whole chapter just focuses on the first part of Jesus's mock trial after he is arrested. And so this chapter is just full of conspiracy, cruelty, lies, and injustice. That's all driven by religious and political motivation by the Jewish leaders. And they end up sentencing an innocent man, well, actually more than a man, right? A God in flesh, to die. And the story as we discuss it seems like nothing but just a humiliation and just loss. But we know that the end of it all was a great triumph. And that by dying on the cross, he gave us everlasting hope and gave us a chance to be able to reaffirm God's love and be reconciled to him when we accept him as our personal savior. So that is the chapter today. Okay, so before we get started, I kind of wanted to actually go over quickly review who the major characters are, because I think it's going to help us to understand the story better. And let's see. I'll go with James first. James, who is Ananias?
Okay, Ananias was the prior head of the high priests. And I guess it said he was retired, but still elderly and very respected in the priest community. Mhm.
Yep. And Kosuke, who was Caiaphas?
I think Caiaphas is a current high priest, and I think he is son-in-law of the Annas.
I keep wanting to say Anus with his name.
No, not Annas. Annas. Annas.
Ananias?
Yeah, well, English pronunciation I don't know, but it's Annas. My Japanese Bible say Annas.
Okay.
English I don't know.
Yes.
Annas.
And so he's the
the previous high priest.
No, the
current high priest.
Current high priest.
Yeah.
And it's the Ananias and Caiaphas who, along with basically the rest of the Sanhedrin, and Marvin, who are the Sanhedrins? Who are they? What are they?
It's like the ruling priestly body that rules Israel, but they don't have complete power. Obviously, the Romans are an occupying force. So the Romans had their own governor and kept certain executive functions to themselves, but allowed a lot of the cultural and social kind of local rulership to be handled by the Sanhedrin.
Yes. Yeah. And then there is this chapter doesn't go into it, but there are two other characters in the rest of the story. The Pilate, who was the governor of Judah,
Judah, Judah
and
Samaria.
Herod, who was the governor of Galilee.
yeah, Herod is a kind of vassal.
Those two characters.
Yeah,
Herod's supposedly the king,
Yeah.
He's
king.
supposedly the king.
but
Okay.
it's really kind of under the rulership of Rome.
Okay, all right. So my first question is, why was Jesus first brought to Ananias after his arrest? Even though he was the ex-high priest and not the current one. Why was that? Let's go with Marvin.
Well, the chapter talks about even though he wasn't in the current leadership position, out of respect for his kind of elder statesman role, they brought him there first. With both the this so-called trials in front of actually all of these individuals, the Jewish leadership were trying to find some sort of cause to have Jesus put to death. And so, it was kind of a comedy of errors in some ways because, no one could actually prove that he had done something criminal. So they just kind of ping-pong him back and forth.
Yeah, seems like he was a man of a great influence because the chapter said that his counsel was taken as a voice of God. And any other characteristic about him, why Jesus was brought to him first instead of the current Caiaphas, James or Josque? Any other?
There was a little bit of a sense that seemed like Annas himself instigated this meeting with him. There was a statement in the beginning the paragraphs that says, he was afraid that the less experienced Caiaphas might fail of securing the object for which they were working.
Mhm,
His artifice, cunning, and subtlety must be used on this occasion,
mhm.
to secure Jesus' condemnation. It
Yeah,
almost seemed like he had a little bit of his hand in the pie to try to arrange this so he could take it upon himself with his experience and cunning as an experienced former high priest to make sure that Jesus gets condemned. This threat to their respect and power.
yes,
Mhm.
yes. Seems like Caiaphas and Ananias were co-conspirators of arresting Jesus, and we know that from the stories leading up to this point that I don't know for how long this has been going on, maybe months, maybe even years, that they had sent spies, right, to where Jesus spoke, and they would take back whatever that Jesus talked about and report it to them. So they were building up this conspiracy to arrest him and then eventually put him to death, really. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So under the Roman rule, the Sanhedrin could only examine a prisoner and pass judgment, and it had to be made valid by the Romans. They couldn't just put someone to death without the Romans having the actual making the final decision. And so therefore, it was really essential that whatever charge that they bring against Christ, that both the Romans and the Jews had to sort of agree on, and in regards to pointing Jesus as the criminal. So what charges were brought up against Jesus? What were some of the charges? There were two main ones they ended up trying to focus on, but aside from all that, there were other charges. It just none of it was found to be valid that they could prove. Josque?
Well, I mean that Jesus was accused by saying that I will rebuild this temple within 3 days. That's also brought to in front of to that this high priest. But sounds like um, he didn't break destroy the temple. So by saying that, I don't know how much charges that they could. I think that but book says Ellen G. White said that none of those testimonies coincide or matches. So it was not valid kind of testimony against him. He was also accused of I think main one, and that's basically convinced that the entire community, including Sanhedrin, was that he claimed that he was a son of God, and that's eventually Caiaphas asked that. So are you a son of God? And Jesus couldn't deny, yes, I am. So that's a determining
Yep.
testimony. I think.
Yep. Yep. Anything else? Anyone else?
I think early on, besides trying to take his words literally that he would destroy the temple and then 3 days later build it again, that kind of went nowhere because on its face it's clearly allegorical. But the thing that they thought would really gain traction with the Romans was the charge of sedition, to basically overthrow the government. And if they could convict him of that, then they thought, oh, the Romans will easily rubber stamp this because what they'd be most concerned about is keeping the governmental power secure and stable. But they weren't able to successfully do that either because even though the disciples and everyone who followed Jesus wished that Jesus was there to be a military ruler, he wasn't, and he always corrected them when they gave voice to that hope. So those two charges that were more earthly were attempted, but they said that they brought false witnesses to actually to give perjured testimony, and when examined, they just contradicted each other because they couldn't keep their stories straight because they were lies.
I mute. Sorry, the Kenta was eating the carpet. Sorry.
So definitely. So it's just because this trial was a mock trial anyway, and there was no justice in this trial, and they really tried to, come up with ways to condemn Jesus, but it just wasn't possible up to this point. So, obviously, I mean, Marvin knows this, that there are definite rules as to how the trial is conducted, right? And and even in this time, absolutely there were rules. But what rules did the Sanhedrin break in regards to conducting their own trial on Jesus? What were some of the rules that were broken, or what were some of the rules? James?
I think I was remember reading something about even in their conduct of justice that they were supposed to start with the premise of you're innocent until proven guilty, but yet we see here from the start that that they've pretty much already condemned Jesus and labeled him as a guilty rebellious usurper of the state, of their power, of their institution. So I think that may be one where they are eating their own words there, that they're not approaching this in the fair, just way that they may have normally. Yeah.
Definitely. Marvin?
Yeah, interestingly, they had a strict rule that you couldn't conduct these trials at nighttime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, you
And
know,
why do you think that was? Why was that rule in place?
I'm not sure they went into that so much,
Mhm.
but I think certainly the symbolism is there that, you know, a trial is supposed to shine the light of truth on,
Mm, mm,
you know, on a set of allegations or charges.
mm,
And certainly everything that you would be concerned about a nighttime trial existed here. You know, they were the jurors or the public observing the trial, they were all the rabble, right?
mhm.
Not good, respectable citizens who are home sleeping after a hard day's work, you know, and drinking and milling about and
Mm,
causing trouble. And you know, the idea of order and structure and you know, the rule of law, I think being conducted during the daytime versus, you know, in secret in the middle of the night is probably the reason behind that rule.
yeah. And then there was is there any other rule that they broke? Kosuke, any other rule?
Not sure, but I know that not all the Sanhedrin members were there. Maybe
Mhm.
because of the nighttime, especially like Joseph Arimathea or that um, one more
Nicodemus. Mhm.
Nicodemus that who are actually supporting Jesus. Those people are not invited, and maybe partly because that it's held nighttime, probably informed. It's not the official Sanhedrin, probably. Based on the certain that procedures, people should be called, but I don't think that that process was taken.
Yeah, the chapter talked about how those two men, and there were others who were, I think, who believed in Jesus as the Messiah, but was not able to, verbally say their belief in fear of retaliation. And but during this mock trial, they were not invited, just so that they don't have any say in how the outcome will come out to be. Yeah. So there were a couple other things that it said that these trials were not to occur during the holidays, and this was a Passover season, and then it was to take place in the official like a court. I think, if I'm my understanding, that these courts were placed within a temple, and but this the mock trials were happening at the Ananias's home. I don't know if I'm 100% understanding that correctly, but that's what I got. And also you had to have 2 or 3 witnesses who like in every detail agreed on their statements. But we know that there were, they couldn't come to any conclusion because there's so many statements that did not even jive together. So, and then of course the hiring of the witnesses to tell lies, right? And then he was mocked and abused during this time. And yeah. So the second question with that is, why was there need to conduct such a haste just a haste trial? I mean, it's not a real trial, it's a mock trial, but why was it done so hastily? Marvin?
Yeah, Jesus had ministered to the nation of Israel and Samaria and not just the Jews, but the Roman centurion, people at all different levels of society and the government had listened to his words, been convicted of their truth. So while the rabble may have been easily manipulated, uh, the high priests, the Sanhedrin feared that given enough time, that the people overall would have come to support Jesus. And so they saw him just getting more and more powerful, right? They saw the triumphal entry. His miracles were getting, more astounding. And so they felt like, look, their entire power structure was at risk. So they needed to pounce and secure an unjust but final solution, which is to get a guilty verdict and have him put to death.
Mhm. Yep, yes. Okay, yeah, I think by all account, they really truly wanted to have him condemned and die at this point. They were no longer going to just allow, like you said, their own influence and power to diminish any more than what it had been. Yeah. Okay. Next question. So both Ananias and Caiaphas asked many questions to Jesus, and they were hoping to trap him with the kind of questions that they were asking him. But and many false witnesses and many stories were made up, but none of them were successful in being able to actually condemn Jesus. And people just ended up being confused and perplexed as to how they're going to secure this condemnation. It's kind of funny. I mean, as we read this chapter, there's such a desperation, such a hatred in that mock trial, and these men are trying everything possible, yet there is nothing to condemn him with. I mean, we know that Jesus was a sinless man, and here it's shown that exactly that's truth, right? So we also know that maybe not necessarily from this chapter, the Sanhedrin is made up of like high priests, and then there were Pharisees and there are Sadducees, right? And the Pharisees and Sadducees, they did not get along. They had many disagreements and disputes around their beliefs. So Caiaphas was having difficulty trying to control their own court, or judges, if you will, to ensure one, that his own sins will not be brought about during the questioning, and then two, that control it in a way that the Pharisees and the Sadducees do not contradict each other or get into these disputes that would actually show that Jesus' teachings and that there's nothing to condemn him with. There's a lot going on, right, in this trial. There's a lot going on that
Democrats and the Republicans kind of things.
Yeah. So let's see. The question is, why did they at the last there were two witnesses, right, who were bribed and brought forth to make a statement about how Jesus said he was going to destroy the temple and then raise it up in 3 days, right? And we know that he was actually referring to his own death, right? Death on the cross and his resurrection. But they falsified the statement. They misstated the statement, basically. And so why did they finally settle on this particular point? What was the reason? Oh, Marvin? Sorry.
You mean the point about him being the Son of God?
No, the
Or-
point about him destroying the temple and raising up in 3 days. Why did they think that this was I mean, the point that they should settle on in trying to get Jesus condemned? And
Yeah,
Jesus being a son of God, that comes later, but prior to that.
Yeah, this was actually an insight that I wasn't aware of, although I've read this book a couple times.
Mhm.
The author, Ellen White, talks about the fact that the Romans were actually very invested in the temple.
Mhm, mhm.
That they had spent, after they conquered Israel, they had actually invested quite a bit of money to
Mhm.
beautify it, to renovate it, and they were actually very proud of it.
Mhm.
So the priests, the high priests thought that, oh, here's a statement that Jesus made. Let's twist it around, and to some extent, it's connected to the sedition if it's a building or a structure that, in some ways represents the power of Rome.
Mhm.
That Jesus was going to destroy it, and that's why they thought it might be appealing, because they knew that whatever guilty verdict they secured, it would have to be compelling enough, threatening enough to the Romans to be able to actually get permission to put Jesus to death.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. But why did this accusation fail?
Yeah, I mean, they talked about, so again, multiple witnesses. There's a rule in our modern day law that unless you're a party to the lawsuit or the criminal case, witnesses are supposed to not be present in the courtroom while other witnesses testify.
Oh. Mhm.
So there's a rule about that. And so a witness is supposed to, the witnesses testify, but all the other witnesses who are listed, who are going to testify at trial, can't be present during other witnesses' testimony.
Oh.
Mm.
The reason is that they're not supposed to be allowed to hear what other witnesses say
Mm.
and inform their testimony so that there is, consistency in the testimony. It's supposed to simply be what their own firsthand knowledge is of the issue.
Mm.
Perhaps there is also a rule like that here, where these witnesses who were paid for to provide perjured testimony, couldn't keep their stories straight, and or maybe they just they weren't that bright, or maybe they were told, all right, we want you to say this, this, and that, and then they come in and they testify as to what they thought they were supposed to testify, but the details were wrong, and ended up being these perjured witnesses and ended up contradicting one another. And I think too the basic premise was that they understood, the point was that Jesus was saying, I'll build it up again in 3 days. So while I guess, possibly you could destroy a physical structure as grand as the temple in a day, everyone understood that you couldn't possibly rebuild it in 3 days. So, that ended up going nowhere.
Yeah, I think that that charge can put the Jesus in a maybe that misdemeanor in the current days. I don't know. I mean, because it's just he might be treated a lunatic or a dreamer. I mean that he didn't make any physical actions on it, so yeah,
Mhm.
shouldn't be a death.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, up to this point, Jesus does not really answer their questions, right? Mostly he remains silent, and but at last, the Caiaphas asks him the question. Basically, I can't quite explain this, but I think maybe Caiaphas is telling Jesus, like, under oath, like, you must tell us who you are. Like, you tell us, are you the Son of God? Am I interpreting this right? Yeah. And so Jesus answers him, right? And why does Jesus finally answer this question of, tell us if you are the Christ or the Son of God? Kosuke?
Well, so first of all, I think that's a true testimony. It's a truth. He cannot deny because he's here as a son of God to be sacrificed. So that's his mission. So he just acknowledged it. And that's the only probably sin from their eyes. So I think that he was judged in a sense accurately in a human perspective. That's a focal point. Actually, Jesus is a son of God, and that was the point that his fate determined. The thing is, because I was in front of everybody heard, and there isn't any testimony or witness required, because everybody heard about it, heard from his mouth. So it's just like a confession, I think, that if the criminal confessed truly in front of the people, I think that it's guided him to that, to the result. So
Yeah. So he not only answers by affirming that yes, he is a son of God, but he goes further in responding and goes into this whole statement about how he is going to be, after all this,
yeah,
he is going to be sitting in the right hand of God, and that he will be returning
Yeah.
as the king.
Yeah.
And in that statement, Caiaphas
like
it saw his life, basically saw his life in front of him, right? Pass through. And what did he see in that in his mind? James?
That I think he kind of seemed like he saw himself condemned, that it says that every secret thing would be set in the light of God's countenance. And I think that terrified him.
Yeah, it really, really terrified him. And I think it said that for a minute that he was convicted that this was a son of God. Yet he quickly vanished his thought and became even more hateful toward God and toward Jesus. And he did something that was absolutely like unthinkable as a high priest. And Marvin, what was that? What did he do?
Yeah, he rended his garments, and that was from God's law, from the law that he had given to the nation of Israel. That was never to be done, because the priestly garments had tremendous meaning. It wasn't just to show wealth or power of the human being. The priestly garments represented the connection between the priest and God. So to tear the garment was to separate the human from the divine. If the priest was representing God's connection to his people, and the priest guarded that, and then to tear that was it was like a capital offense.
Yeah, that was actually, he should have been put to death by stoning, right? It's really interesting how here he is trying to do everything in his power to condemn Jesus, yet he ends up condemning himself. Yeah. Yeah, and so it just showed me the hatred that was in his heart toward Jesus. And we know from this chapter that he had especially been jealous of Jesus because of the influence that Jesus had on people, the way that people followed him and believed in him. And so his great jealousy and hatred led him to wanting to ensure that Jesus was condemned, but he ended up condemning himself. Yeah, and you know, I think that as humans, when we behave in a way that demonstrates such a hatred toward another human being or group of people, I think that that hatred, that sin, doesn't remain hidden, but rather I think that people around you eventually sees the hatred and sinfulness of the behaviors of those people. And even this chapter talked about how when toward the end of this mock trial, the crowds were moving toward Jesus to basically to kill him, and he could have died there then if the Roman soldiers had not held the crowd back, and the Roman soldiers saw that this man was innocent, and yet these Jews were condemning him. So I think that the truth and the innocence of a man or Jesus could not be hidden. Yeah. In this, yeah. So the next question then is let's see. Okay, so the story also goes into talking about Peter and his denial of Christ, right? And it says that both John and Peter had gone to the trial, but when John went into the court, he did not hide his identity, right? Whereas Peter was trying to hide who he is. And so Peter he ended up, we know that Jesus had predicted that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crows twice. And in fact, the Peter does end up doing this, right? And as I was reading this, I couldn't help think, in our own life as a Christians, have there ever been a situation, at times where as a Christians, we also denied Christ, or we tried to hide the fact that we are Christian. And what was the result of that, or if there was any outcome from that? Kosuke, you want to?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, you know. Peter and John are two pillars, you know, or one of the pillars of the 12 disciples, and they, at this critical moment of the Jesus' final moment in this life, they behave differently. Yet both became strong disciples after the Jesus' death. And I say that, you know, there's a result. Peter needed to run away after this. He couldn't stay near Jesus, but John was stayed close to Jesus, even that Jesus was on the cross. And he had an opportunity to witness all these things and write it down, right? That as a gospel. So he played a very important role. He's probably that the last 12 disciples survived until the old age. Yeah, Peter became also that a very important disciple. And I remember the pastor was talking about last week, last week sermon. Is it last week? Sorry, that Marvin, that Marvin,
Not
last week is a Marvin
previous,
sermon,
yeah.
right? That 2 weeks later, the pastor was talking about, okay, so Peter needed maybe more love and instruction from God because his cup is more empty than others. Although we tended to think that Peter was more blessed, but actually Peter was more empty. And God needed to give more encouragement and also instructions and also foretold him what would happen so that he would not lose his faith. So I think what else I was saying? I would say that so for me, I didn't have a kind of occasion I needed to tell others that I'm not a Christian.
Or conceal the fact that you're a Christian.
Yeah, I
or-
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, I didn't have that kind of a occasion experience.
Mhm.
And I don't know that that will happen in the future. Never know. I couldn't say. But I think in a sense that just like a Peter, if you deny your relationship with God, and that puts you in danger. Peter was in danger. The Bible said that Satan allowed to try you, but I prayed for you, that Jesus said. If there wasn't that prayer, he might have lost his faith in Jesus, condemning himself with a regret. So I think that's important for us to be reminded that that's our lifeline. If we lose lifeline, we drift away. It's anchor of the yacht. If we lose the anchor, we drift away, and that's a risk we may face by denying that, our relationship. That's how I feel.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marvin, have you ever concealed or pretended or to be not be a Christian or follower of Christ in your life?
Well, I rebelled against God for 7. But then after that, my fervor and my gratefulness remain snatched from the jaws of sin. I think have always energized me to be very open about my faith.
Mhm.
I think that Peter had, from a worldly perspective, had a lot of fear and a lot to lose because the Messiah was now arrested and being put on trial. So from when he put his stock in worldly power and worldly things, I think that's what led him to deny Jesus. I think that as Seventh Day Adventists, we believe that that time will come for all true believers, where we will have everything to lose from a worldly standpoint. Our wealth, or even our ability to purchase things, and then even our liberty in lives. So I think that the lesson is well learned for us, that we like Peter, we should not put our confidence in our own selves. We should not think that when that time comes, we are so bold, we're so courageous, we're so loyal that we'll be able to proclaim our Christian faith, without without fear. I think that we have to recognize that there may come a time where we're publicly espousing our faith, maybe in the Sabbath, could put us at real risk, and that even though we think we'll be courageous, that we've got to be able to cling to the foot of the cross, and when that time comes.
Amen. Yeah. What about you, James? Any experience?
I can't think of a specific story to share, but one of the things I was reading here that really strikes me was that statement. It said that if Peter were to be asked to go out with a spear and sword to fight in warfare, that he would have had no hesitation. And yet it says that under the finger of scorn and ridicule, he cowered. And so that's such an interesting, to me, psychological statement. What is it about the finger of scorn and ridicule that really put Peter down, where he he became fearful and he cowered? It attests to perhaps his emotional health and his true relationship with Jesus. Also part of his ideas of what Jesus's kingdom comes to play. I If anything, I'll share this, that in college for myself, I did face the finger of ridicule and scorn for my faith. And unfortunately, the price I paid to confess that was loneliness. Going to a public university where there weren't many Adventists other than those friends I had at church, it was tough. But I'll tell you, the reward I gained from that was a passionate faith that God bestowed me. I remember reading Desire of Ages or Great Controversy sometimes, just like a couple of minutes every night in my dorm room before I fell asleep. And that proved to me a amazing source of faith and encouragement. In fact, I think, yeah, if it weren't for that and that constant reminder that God is ever present, I don't know that I would be still in church today.
Amen to
Yeah,
that.
amen to that. Go ahead, Annie. You go ahead.
Yeah, so I think what I want to say is denying Christ just verbally is one aspect, but also that Peter I think he was denying that he could have denied that who Jesus truly was. The mm, observing that Jesus was so easily arrested and under that investigation and persecution, looks like that no hope for him to be a powerful teacher or that God. Peter could have lost that his faith in Jesus entirely. If that he didn't have that the words from Jesus, the I pray for you, and you know that you will deny 3 times. That prophecy, I think that made him realize that what's happening is actually on a track in a sense later on, you know. But my point is that we could have that. We could do the same thing. We may face the moment that we deny Jesus, not verbally saying that I don't know him, but in our heart that well, I don't know Jesus, who truly is a God, and that there might be that moment. They might have that might have had that moment, and uh, that was a danger, and I think that's why the we I think that that's why we need to be connected with God through Bible study and prayer. I think the and that there's a moment that we need to cling to God. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely understand where James is coming from when you talked about your college days, because like I too went to public school. I think Marvin too. We all three of us all went to public college, right? And you're right. It was so lonely. It was so lonely, especially on Friday night. Oh, that was the loneliest time because because you grew up keeping Sabbath, right? And in public schools, when does the party start? It starts on a Friday night. It really starts on a Friday night.
It was Thursday night for our school.
Huh? Thursday night
It
for
was
your
Thursday
school?
night for our school.
And yeah, and goes through the whole weekend, right? So, to try and keep a Sabbath, honestly, like in my mind, trying to be a good Christian, good Seventh-day Adventist Christian was really lonely. And for me, unlike James, after the first year, I literally, I still remember, I literally made a conscious decision in my mind that I'm not gonna do this anymore. So like I was, for the next 2 years, it was just partying. I mean, just it was partying. I mean, that I seriously, I remember making that conscious choice. It was just too lonely. And so, um, and after 2 years, like I got on my knees, like, God, please help me to stop this lifestyle that I've got myself into. I mean, literally, I got on my knees. And then after that, I met Kosuke. And funny thing is, Kosuke, I think because he's older, he's older by 6 years, and because he's done that life while he was younger, right?
I drank enough.
Yeah.
I smoked enough.
He wasn't into that anymore. And by like being with him, it took me out of that whole party scene. And so I actually thank God. I thought he was a God's intervention for me.
That's I don't know, but
So yeah, so that's what happened to, yeah, that's my experience. Yeah. But I think that, you know, in my mind, every time I sin, every time I'm not like God in my character, in what I say or what I think, I'm denying Christ. And this is why, Jesus had to die for us, right? Because because of our heart there's sin in it. And there's nothing that we can do, honestly, to remove that sin from our heart except through accepting Christ as our Savior. Yeah. So, okay, let's see what time is it. We got 5 more minutes. I think throughout this chapter, we see that Jesus was mocked, he was hit, he was spat on, he was humiliated, abused in so many ways that the chapter actually says that there is no other a human being person who was heaped on with such abuse, and that it was such a what's the word, something that was so I forgot the word, that just wasn't, because it was so much sin and hatred in that courtroom that Jesus, there was a temptation on Jesus's part to basically say the word, right? And have the angels come and protect him, or he himself could have actually turned the court proceedings in a way that, again, that all the condemnation would have gone to the people and not to Jesus. But he chose to remain silent. He chose through all that verbal and physical abuse, and he did not react with any anger. And my question is, why did he not respond in that way that I think that probably all of us would so easily do? And what do we learn from the way he responded to those verbal and physical abuse? Because like we talked about, we may very well be one day in that exact situation. So, yeah, how was he able to stay that way, and what can we learn from it? James, let's.
I'll just start with
I think he had his original mission and his father in mind, and he never veered from saying that. I love that he's described as having a gentle, noble, dignified countenance, and without even a thought of retaliation uh, towards his accusers. And that's definitely in contrast with how I would have perhaps reacted or been swayed, or it testifies to his true divinity, his, that even his enemies, at least for a glimpse or a thought, a passing thought, oh my goodness, could this man be God? Because of his unreal peace and just calm, gentle demeanor.
Yeah. Amen. Marvin?
Well, God's characters, and therefore Jesus is as well, is typified by grace, mercy, and forbearance.
Yeah.
If you're being unjustly abused, even put to death, but you don't have the power to do anything about it, you're simply a victim. But God and Jesus, they have all the power. They have all the power of the entire universe, yet they forbear to bring a just punishment upon all of humanity because they love us. And and this is, perhaps the most striking example that abused, literally stricken and spit upon, and lied about and condemned, Jesus forbear to punish them. Instead, went like a lamb to the slaughter, because that's what was necessary to fulfill the promise given to Adam and Eve, that though they sinned by laying down his life, you could always save.
Okay. Yeah, so the Jesus certainly endured all those physical, verbal abuse and so forth. But striking me is that how Jesus was obedient to the prophecy. He said that, don't you remember that I could bring that the 12, how do you call that, armies, legions to protect me from these people, but yet so that the Bible prophecy to be accomplished, I'll accept this cup, right? So all those prophecies are in the Old Testament, and he was struck by God's hand, and he accepted. Now that what I wonder is that then how we behave according to the prophecy. Jesus had a choice to follow this Bible prophecy or not. He had 100% choice. So, but he chose that way so that God's will be accomplished. Bible prophecy was done. Now, the Bible prophecy was also given to us. And it's our choice that how we live accordingly. And that's a kind of a things that coming to my heart. That okay, Jesus behaved this way. How we behave according to Bible. That's a kind of things I was thinking about.
I mean, the one I think truth, the one fact that keeps playing in my mind as I study all these chapters, and is our human heart, is just how it can be so deceiving that cannot be trusted. I cannot sit here and say I am going to be this and this. I cannot say, but I think that we can all agree that through Jesus and the works of the Holy Spirit, that we can experience triumph, right, in our life here, and that we just truly just have to just make the choice. You're right. We do need to make the choice to just cling to God.
Yeah. And the choice is the choice to the life and the joy and happiness and the true happiness. I would say that if without God, how we can be happy in this chaotic world right now? Honestly speaking, just despair me. Nothing that I because of my job that I read the news all the time, right? Nothing good in this world. I mean, yeah, truly. Without God, I wonder how we can be happy. That's what I feel. Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
I know this chapter seems like it's just ending abruptly, but there is a second part of this. This is why it's ending abruptly. So please, everyone, join us for next week. And Marvin, James, and Kosuke, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your inputs. It's been a blessing. Thank you.